Hello, my name is Matt Clayton, and I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator for Thrive Mat-Su. And with me today is Michael Carson. And Michael is at work with the Opioid Task Force, among other initiatives, to help stop the plague of substance abuse and overdose fatalities in our community. And so, want to welcome Michael and just thank him for all the tireless work that he's doing advocating on this issue. Michael, can you share with me how the Opioid Task Force was started?
Yes, thanks, Matt, and thanks for the opportunity to share this information with you and other valuable information that we will share in this conversation for both youth and parents. Um, there were some early grassroots, boots on the ground community meetings that happened at my house. Michelle Overstreet, the director and now the CEO of my house, asked, because of my position at my house, the vice president and the recovery specialist, if I would be willing to facilitate those meetings. And so there were, I would say, probably three early community meetings with, in the beginning, parents that had been directly affected by the opioid epidemic. We have to remember back then we were dealing with the first phase that had to do with pills, pain pills, Oxycontin to be specific. And parents shared their journey with their children. And unfortunately, some of those children did die due to an overdose. Many of those children were still out there gunning and running, as we say. And parents were very frustrated in trying to find services at the time. We have to remember this was at least 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And then by maybe the fourth meeting, and we also had people in recovery sharing a real important message that recovery is possible. And those meetings, to be short, were reeling, very emotional meetings. And after about the third or fourth meeting, decided to be able to corral or maybe try to take that energy and be able to focus into some action. So during maybe it was the third or fourth meeting, started identifying some priorities, and then we identified 5 top priorities. And those 5 top priorities is what actually launched the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force. So just as an example, the first priority had to do with detox with dignity. And that was the result of Kelsey Green, John Green's daughter, who died in the Anchorage jail on the floor due to heroin withdrawals.
Mm.
She came in, she was already underweight. She already had an addiction issue, and she let them know. And within 4 days, she lost 20 pounds. And on the 5th day, unfortunately, she died.
Wow.
So John was one of the instruments that was part of about the fourth meeting when people started exchanging business cards. Providers ended up coming to the table. So that was a real transition into providing services. And we started looking at other priorities, peer-to-peer opportunities. We started looking at prevention strategies. So that was the beginning of the task force. And we have been engaged with a number of partners, including Thrive, the hospital, all the service providers in the Valley, state providers. That was with the Office of Substance Misuse and Addiction Prevention, Health and Social Services, Department of Health, Department of Behavioral Health. So I would say that we probably have at least 200 people on our listserv that are individuals or individuals connected with agencies. So that's how it started.
Thank you for sharing that history, and a little bit of that overlaps my own history because I was at my house for a couple years, and Very grateful for the work that they're also doing in our community, helping stabilize young people, either with addiction issues or homelessness or both. And so just very grateful for all the work that you and your team are doing. In addition to your role at the Opioid Task Force, you were sharing with me before we started recording about the various works that you're doing to help end the opioid epidemic. Can you share some of your other roles with me?
Yeah, one of the other positions that I've taken probably within the last year is the State Opioid Steering Committee, Partners for Change. And I was asked to join that group, and the majority or all of the other partners are connected with a government agency. Maybe that be the Office of Substance Misuse and Addiction Prevention, maybe on the ABADA committee. That's the Alcohol and Drug Committee for the state. And so that has a focus of sharing resources that are available, workshops, webinars. Then what we do is we provide that to all the local task forces and coalitions across the state. So what we're trying to do is bring everybody together, be able to collaborate, share strategies, share events. Some of the events that the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force has sponsored is International Overdose Day, August 31st. We usually always have some event where we read names. There's another event, August 10th. That's the day that Kelsey Green died in the Anchorage jail. We read names there. We've had 5 different summits at the Glen Massey Theater. We have actually partnered with United Way of Mat-Su because they were a host of one of those. So lots of things going on, and just trying to coordinate
Right.
all of those agencies to be able to spearhead some measures and strategies to reduce opioid use, misuse, and obviously addiction.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for all the work that you're doing. I know that this is your retirement, but you're passionately serving, full time as an advocate and ally to help end this crisis. Can I ask, Michael, why are you so passionate about this issue? I know that I know some people personally that you've lost. Is it primarily because of those that you've lost in your life to opioid, or what is it that drives you so passionately about this?
I was, to be honest, I was one of those kids
Yeah.
growing up. I'm a product of the 60s. I grew up in Southern California. I was probably a high ACEs score.
Yeah.
Lots of unfortunate trauma that happened in my life, dealing with some mental health issues, ended up self-medicating, and ended up lost in the purple haze. Unfortunately, continued into my addiction, ended up with some felony charges, ended up doing some jail time, ended up with some warrants. And but by the grace of God, this past year, I celebrated 34 years clean and sober.
Oh, wow.
So I can almost say been there, done that. But it's different today, Matt, than it was when I was out there gunning and running. I mean, one example was, just real quickly, I ended up boarding a bus in Southern California in an alcohol blackout, but then I ended up living in Morocco, and how does that happen? Well, it's called addiction, right? So,
Wow.
yeah, so by the grace of God, I was able to, live through all that. And yeah, I will tell you, it got to the point where the gunmetal was tasting good in my mouth and the knife was feeling good on the inside of my wrist, and I knew which way to drag it. So that's how bad it got. But
Wow.
again, by the grace of God, was able to turn that around. And so, yeah, it's been, I am so grateful for my opportunity to be alive. So I'm definitely paying back maybe rent.
So it,
But today the drug scene is so much different today than it was back in the 60s. I mean, the potency of THC, being able to dab it, that means take a butane torch to it and, um, concentrate it, will double, triple the THC content. We're talking, we're in the third phase of the opiate epidemic. I refer to the second phase, that's heroin, that's chasing the dragon, and now we're dealing with the beast.
wow.
Fentanyl, yeah, 50 more times more powerful than heroin, 100 times more powerful than morphine. So it is opioid roulette out there. There is
Yeah.
nothing safe on the
Well,
street.
we're gonna get into some of those messages for the parents and students soon, but just to kind of recap that question, I would say, just listening to your answer, I would say that empathy for those struggling with addiction, and then also gratefulness for the fact that you found recovery. In addition to those that you've also lost to addiction, it seems like the primary drivers for your passion. And I've also lost people for with addiction, and which drives the work that I do in prevention. Um, Another question I have for you on this issue is, when I first moved to the community about 5 years ago, it was when we were debating, what was it, SB 91, I think, that had exploded crime and had exploded addiction, and because of the different changes that they had done in criminal law. And without getting into that debate, what I noticed moving into the area was that just the terrible stigma against addicts, and the terrible dehumanizing language that so many people in the public referred to, those struggling with addiction, with just these terrible dehumanizing words. And so, um, speaking to our Mat-Su community, why should other people care about those who are struggling with addiction?
Because it can happen in your own life in a second.
Yeah.
And they say, Matt, 1 out of 3 Alaskans have been directly affected by the opiate epidemic.
Wow.
And I could give you a list of parents that have lost kids, and besides John Green. And in fact, a lesson I wrote called Kelsey's Lesson was dedicated to Kelsey and a number of other youth that have unfortunately passed on. I mean,
Right.
there's one individual you mentioned, you used to, work. I remember when you were working at my house with outreach, we had a young man, and this is public information. I mean, I'm not sharing any confidential information. We had a young man in our program, and was an adopted grandson to a very well-known federal legislator. And
Right.
unfortunately, last year, when there was a bad batch of heroin that came through, tainted, contaminated with fentanyl, he overdosed.
Wow.
And there were 7 or 8 of them in that March bad batch, and there were 21 emergencies. So nobody is immune to this. It can
Yeah.
happen to any family, and it doesn't matter what economic status, what political, shade or color you may be, what religion you may be. It can happen to any family, and there are many out there. And so it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word addict. We're even trying to change that language. We used to refer to them as junkies because, they used to steal stuff and copper and things like that and sell it and then use that money to buy their dope. And then, we moved. And so now we're even trying to change the word addict to a person suffering or trapped in addiction.
Right.
So language is so important. And you're right, the stigma is really creating barriers for people to get into detox or treatment. Because I think what happens is, Matt, you're absolutely right, that the stigma creates shame and guilt.
Right.
They're carrying enough of that already, right? And
Shame has never helped anybody get out of addiction.
no, absolutely not. So we and all, and I, the recovery stories are important for people to hear because recovery is possible for anyone. And
Right.
that person can become productive and successful. And you know what? You can see that with the peer-to-peer movement that's happening. I mean, that is really happening in Mat-Su, where the majority of different agencies, and my house being one of them, is using case managers that have experienced that themselves. They can talk the language, they know what it's like, and it's a different dynamics. When you're in therapy, you're sitting across from someone.
Right.
In a peer-to-peer relationship, you're walking side by side.
Yeah,
It's a whole
absolutely.
different dynamics. So those people that are in recovery that have been there, done that, are so valuable for our community to understand, again, recovery is possible
Right.
and the limits are unlimited.
Yeah. And I've heard you say so often that that recovery is community and addiction is isolation. And just to kind of recap that whole discussion there, like I see shame as like a wedge that drives people apart. And so that's why it's so toxic to the recovery effort. And so yeah, I just like to encourage everybody to just, lay off the shame and try to have some grace and empathy for those who are struggling. So so Michael, if you
Nobody born intended to become trapped or suffer from the issue of addiction.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I talk to a lot of children about what they want to do when they grow up, and I've never heard any of them say that they want to be homeless and addicted to drugs. And so
Exactly.
it's
Right.
never the plan.
Right.
So
And a lot of that got tripped up because, more than most, trauma has
right,
really tripped them up.
right,
And unfortunately, that most likely is the driving force for many youth or even adults that start looking at self-medication.
right. And we'll have a separate discussion about we're going to go deeper into the trauma realm in future interviews, but just to kind of summarize what Michael's talking about there, if you're not familiar with ACEs, not familiar with adverse childhood experiences, essentially it's been there's a lot of scientific evidence to demonstrate that the more trauma a young person has that goes unresolved, essentially they self-medicate and they use substance abuse, they use other addictions to numb the pain that they're feeling. And our message to everybody is that hope and healing is possible. You can do more than just numb the pain. You can actually find healing from the pain that you're experiencing and carrying. And so yeah, I'll definitely follow up with a future spotlight to highlight the trauma piece. So
Yeah,
Michael,
I heard a great, I've heard this, I'm sure you've heard it, that you ain't okay and I ain't okay. But
right,
if we ain't, we need to make a plan to get better.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing just to I guess to sum up that trauma message, when I was working at my house and with the students that I work with now at Thrive, one of the things that we do emphasize is that while trauma may not be your fault, healing is your responsibility. And so trauma is not a blank check to get to do whatever you want. Healing is your responsibility to pursue and to find. So that you're not using those unhealthy coping strategies that are going to potentially derail your life.
And all
So,
that's all an inside job. I've worked with youth telling them that I have my personal journey
right,
and that, your personal journey recovery is yours. I remember, Matt, real quickly, I had a kid come out of the youth facility. He ended up at my house and I asked him, are you keeping your nose clean? Did you catch my drift? And
yeah,
he said, yeah. I said, how you doing that? He says, I'm going to church on the rock. I said, whatever turns your crank, man, just as long as it
nice.
ain't crank or meth. If it's Jesus Christ, go for it, stay with it. Everybody's that's in recovery has their own internal journey that they have to take, but we're willing to walk alongside them and then share our journey alongside their journey. That's really powerful stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. So Michael, if I know that you have a huge passion for opioid prevention and specifically the danger of that fentanyl carries in our community. If you could only get a single message across to students what would that message be about this opioid issue?
One pill can kill.
Hmm.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the issue, Matt, is that I just shared before we went to the recording. Last year, the DEA was saying that 4 out of 10 pills have a potential overdose, lethal overdose. And those are Percocet, Xanax, Oxys, Adderall. Now they've cranked up the heat and they say 6 out of 10.
Hmm.
But the bottom line is there is no safe drug on the street.
Hmm.
And this is maybe now a message to the parent that they need to know that they need everything that their child is going to get has to come from a doctor or a licensed pharmacist.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't any way that anybody can take a gamble with anything on the street. It is
Yeah.
just.
With what you're talking about is like buying prescription meds on the street. Any of them could have fentanyl in it. You shared with me before we started recording that a packet the size of Splenda, what did you say? It was 1 gram?
Right.
And it can kill 5 if that was fentanyl, not Splenda. we're not you know, we're not talking about how dangerous Splenda is. We're talking about how dangerous fentanyl is. 1 gram of fentanyl could kill 500 people. And so
And
all
then if you rip that package open, just the amount that would fit on the end of a pencil or a fork tine, 2 milligrams. So that's only 3 or 4 little grains is a fatal overdose.
Wow. And so just to connect the dots here, all of these different prescription medications that are available on the street, many of them, FDA again estimates 6 out of 10
That's
are,
DEA.
excuse me, DEA. Yeah, the FDA doesn't regulate the illegal drugs. The DEA estimates that 6 out of 10 of these drugs that are available on the street are laced with fentanyl. And so,
And the remainder, Matt, are made from heavy metals, rat poisoning, antifreeze. It's just crap.
wow.
It's all coming from Mexico, from the cartel. They're pressing things. And then what happens is they don't clean anything up. So
Right.
when they're pressing counterfeit perks, then they start pressing counterfeit Xanax, and they don't clean stuff up. Everything is contaminated.
Not
Nothing
they're not
pure.
concerned
And
with.
now DEA drug bust, you don't get one drug. You get multiple drugs that are all contaminated.
Wow. So they're definitely not concerned with quality. So definitely be cautious about where you're getting your medication. And I would also add, if you have medications that are going unused, please contact our United Way office. We have drug disposal bags. We have drug pickup locations that are available.
In
So that
fact, I think there's going to be a drug take back DEA in April, correct?
there will, and hopefully this video is people hopefully are seeing this video long beyond April, and so contact our office to find out when the most recent upcoming drug take back day is, and then we always have drug disposal bags available so that you can dispose of your medication safely. Many people who fall into opioid addiction or other types of addiction often do that from finding pills at a loved one's home, and so it's very important that we make sure that those pills do not fall into the wrong hands.
So what's the shelf life of an opioid pill?
Can you answer that for us?
Yeah, forever. They're like Twinkies. They never go bad. So that's why that message that you just shared is so important, that we discard any used opioids and those medication bags for everyone. They need to realize there's a little charcoal filter in there. They have bags that can hold different amounts. You pour water in it, it neutralizes, and then you can just drop it in your own trash.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you may not realize that addiction could start with what you have in your own medicine cabinet, that the wrong, I guess in your home, a family member could find those things and fall into addiction that way. And so Michael, I'll give you a freebie on the one that you already shared with parents. Is there any other message that you would like to share with parents about this opioid issue?
Yeah, I want to be able to ask parents to start those vital conversations and developing those open-ended conversations with their child about what's going on with them. May that be their mental health or unfortunately their lack thereof. All the issues, being able to monitor what they're seeing on their uh, device, and just being able to connect with their kids and be able to have those important conversations because, parents are our children's first teachers. And I would hope that every parent listening to this would begin to have that conversation. I mean, they don't need to dive in deep into the deep water right away, right? Start with the shallow end and start building that relationship. Maybe even having a date, right? Where
Right.
I mean, that would be important. In fact, Matt, I just had a conversation with my grandson, 12 years old, and the conversation was around rainbow fentanyl. And it was the idea that you never accept any candy from a friend. You always get candy that is secure, wrapped, and comes sealed from the store. You never know what can end up. And great picture of that rainbow fentanyl. So,
And I'm glad you brought that up. I was just prepping to talk about that. You had mentioned it before, again, before we started recording. I'm a parent, and my children are 6 years old, 11 years old. I've had that same conversation with them. I've showed them this picture. I've communicated to them that I don't care, how well you know a child in the neighborhood. If anybody's offering you candy, always check with mom and dad before you eat, anything at all. And so I think that this is also a very urgent message to get across to parents is that these rainbow fentanyl pills are out there. This is just one of the forms they take. There are other forms. And yeah, if I saw that, I would assume, I mean, that looks like a lot of the things that we sell in our concession stand at events. It looks like
sweet tarts.
sweet tarts. Yeah, I was struggling to remember which one it looks like, but they look just like sweet tarts. And so, um,
And
so
also, Matt, parents need to realize they're around. There was a drug bust 2 weeks ago, this
right.
Friday in Juneau, and they seized 5,000 counterfeit Oxycontin pills.
Hmm.
5,000. So now here's my concern. My concern, and there was a bust in Skagway 2 weeks before that, a month in Kodiak. So my concern is the amount that is smuggled through and not seized.
Yeah.
So that's terrifying to me,
Right.
knowing that there is some that is getting through. And what we need to do is provide parents and youth with information,
Mm-hmm.
facts, and data. And
Mm-hmm.
just put it out there because I'm convinced that facts and data will provide the information for people to make the best life living decisions that they will need to make to be able to stay safe, be able to stay healthy, and thrive. And thrive happens to be your name. So there you go.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, as we kind of wrap this up, if an organization or an individual wanted to get involved in the opioid task force, what are the next steps for them to get involved?
We meet the first Tuesday of every month.
Okay.
So the next meeting will be April 4th, and we're meeting in the conference room at the Mat-Su Health Foundation.
Okay.
People are I'm willing to give out my cell. If anybody has any questions or looking for any resources or wanting to, be able to get connected, 907-315-4988.
Okay.
I have an
And
email that's, my
go ahead.
last name, Carson, add an S. So it's just Carson's at mtaonline.net. Whoa, we also have 2 Facebook pages.
Okay.
Kelsey's Key is a
Uh-huh.
Facebook page. We're always putting out information and events. And then obviously the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force has a Facebook page.
So I'll put a link. I'll put that contact info you just shared, and I'll put a link to those two Facebook pages in this video comments, and then also in the newsletter that I'm going to be sending out. And so, if you'd like to get involved, check the description of this video for more information. And then, as we close, Michael, is there any final thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be making a phone call right after this, Matt, with Adolescent Health, part of the Division of Public Health, and looking at how we can coordinate agencies and be able to have a single message
Right.
out to youth and parents. So that is a work in progress. Also, real quickly, we have the opioid distribution settlement money coming into the borough. There were 7 regions that received 15%. The rest is going to the state. And so I will keep you, Matt, informed about, eventually there'll be some borough-wide community meetings. And there's $2.3 million going to be sitting on the table for different agencies, groups, youth groups, like yourself, Youth 360, My House will be able to access those funds and be able to hopefully turn the corner on the opiate epidemic. So that is exciting news.
Perfect. Yeah, it is exciting, and I'm glad um, that those additional resources will be available for all the different community organizations trying to turn the tide. And so, again, Michael, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your passionate advocating for this issue, and for those who are struggling with addiction, for the family members. I've seen you frequently comfort the family members of those who have lost other people to addiction. And so, thank you so much for your tireless work, and look forward to seeing just the fruits of your labor continue.
I thank for the opportunity, Matt, and thanks for everything that United Way of Mat-Su and Thrive are doing, and we'll continue this partnership. And like you said, be able to turn the corner on this and create, safe, healthy, thriving children, right? And a community.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.